Welcome back to Politically Charged. I am, as always, your host, Jack Berlin. Today is Wednesday, February 21st. Welcome back to the pod after another extended hiatus. Today we only have one topic because it trumps everything else that's going on in the world right now. Today marks a week since 17 innocent high schoolers and teachers lost their lives in yet another act of senseless gun violence in this country, this time at Marjory Stoneman Douglas High. This is the 25th active school shooting involving elementary or high school students since 1999, the year of the Columbine shooting. 25 times active shooter has broken across the news. Those words have flashed across the screen and the nightmare begins anew. The students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High, through absolutely no fault of their own, are now members of one of the worst statistics possible. Since Columbine in 1999, 150,000 students in at least 170 schools have experienced an active shooter situation on their campus. And this number is conservative. It doesn't even take into account the number of suicides, accidents, and assaults that take place after school hours on school campuses every year. In the immediate aftermath, people from all around the world, in really all walks of life, have been quick to offer thoughts and prayers for those affected. Calls for change have been all over the place and bemoan the government for its inability to act on such an important issue. But truthfully, and as the students and teachers themselves have said, thoughts and prayers just aren't enough. Not when machines designed to inflict massive amounts of damage in as little time as possible are legally and, more importantly, readily available. The students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High have had their innocence and any sense of normality stolen from them by a deranged 19-year-old who legally purchased an AR-15. I've got here in my notes 3 segments that I want to address during this episode. First, the idea that mental illness is the root of all evil behind gun violence, an idea that's recently been spread due in large part to Republicans, specifically the leader of the Republican Party, President Donald Trump. Michael Stone, a psychiatrist at Columbia University, estimates that only about 22% of mass shooters had mental illness, but still, those with mental illnesses bear the brunt of the blame. In fact, the U.S. actually falls in the lower end of the pack in terms of violence in industrialized countries. The catch to that is that the United States has more lethal violence, due in large part to the prevalence of guns, which in the United States alone is around 270 million. Gun homicide rates in the U.S. are 25% higher than in other high-income countries. And while we as a country hold 5% of the world's population, we hold 31% of the world's mass shootings. This stat begs the questions, are Americans more violent by nature? I'm not aware of any studies or research that say for sure, and I really doubt that anybody can say for sure. But I also really doubt that Americans, just by being born here, are more violent than counterparts in the United Kingdom, in Ireland, in Germany, in France. Just by being born in the United States does not make us more violent. There's a bigger problem at play. What can be said for sure is that Americans own nearly half of the 650 million civilian-owned guns worldwide. And Americans are 3 times as likely to commit an assault with a gun. The math really could not be more simple. There are at least 270 million guns in this country. An assault with a gun is 3 times higher here than anywhere else in the world. The math adds up. There's absolutely no doubt that mental health care in this country is a serious issue, one that, similar to gun control and gun legislation, has been overlooked for far too long by politicians on both sides, and really it urgently needs to be addressed. But mental health, at least in this specific case, mental health is not the main issue in this tragedy. It's simply being used by Republicans as a catch-all cover for avoiding the simple reality that there is no reason on God's green earth that civilians need weapons designed to inflict massive amounts of damage in as little time as humanly possible. The main issue here, and don't lose sight of this, is that a 19-year-old kid who had been expelled from school, posted disturbing messages and pictures on social media, was able to legally acquire a machine made for war. Legally acquired. a 19-year-old. In the past 4 months, we've had 2 mass shootings in this country. The one that happened last week and the one that happened at the beginning of October in Las Vegas. Both happened with assault rifles. Now, moving on to the second point that I need to make, the role of the NRA in this tragedy and all those that have come before it. To understand the role of the NRA, 4 statistics need to be pointed out right at the top of this. The first, 66% of voters support stricter gun laws. The second, 67% support a nationwide ban on assault rifles. The third, 83% support mandatory waiting periods on gun purchases. And the last one, 97% of voters support universal background checks. Why, then, are lawmakers unable to make any progress on gun legislation? Normally, when a majority of public opinion is weighted so heavily towards one side of a debate, lawmakers can't help themselves. They're tripping over themselves to gain favor in the court of public opinion. But it hasn't happened in the gun control debate, and that's due to something called the gun control paradox, which basically just says that in this situation, in this debate about gun control, rules are kind of thrown out of the window. The NRA has successfully been able to tie gun ownership and gun rights into people's identities, pitching any potential action to restrict gun ownership as an all-out assault on citizens' rights. By tying gun ownership to the idea of your rights being infringed upon and pushing messages like the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is a good guy with a gun, and that danger is around every corner, you should be able to protect yourself by any means necessary, the NRA has successfully turned a chunk of voters into one-issue voters. What that means is that a candidate's stance on gun control issues can make or break their candidacy from day one, with the core constituent base that they need to get elected. Republican lawmakers and the NRA know that this has become the case, and they have exploited it to a crazy degree. This exploitation of feelings is a big reason behind the lip service or half-hearted statements made in the aftermath of mass shootings. In October, when Las Vegas was struck by tragedy, in part due to something called a bump stock, which makes semi-automatic rifles able to fire fully automatic, Republicans like Speaker of the House Paul Ryan, who's up for re-election this year, were quick to announce that they would look into banning bump stocks. Nothing happened. Just today, when survivors of the Parkland tragedy made their way to the state capitol here in Florida, in Tallahassee, in support of legislation that would have banned assault-style weapons in large-capacity magazines, lawmakers voted it down. Just today, the President of the United States and the Governor of Florida declined an invitation to the ongoing CNN town hall with victims. And just today, just a few minutes ago, a few hours ago, Marco Rubio refused to decline using NRA money in his next political campaign. And the reason for this couldn't be simpler. The NRA has an outsized influence on Republicans' core constituency, the base that they need to get elected and to get reelected. The NRA spent nearly $60 million in the 2016 election season alone, with almost $30 million of that benefiting the Trump campaign. While that type of money is nothing new for money spent during an election season with the presidency up for grabs, the NRA continues to wield an outsized influence on the Republican Party and the legislation process in general. For example, the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, is not and has not been allowed to, since 1996, fund gun control research due to the NRA and Republicans. This type of commitment to the status quo of America being the only country in the world where this happens regularly, where mass shootings happen regularly, has for all intents and purposes turned NRA money into blood money that Republicans have accepted with open arms. My third and final point I want to make on this episode is that each and every one of us have to find a way that we can help in any way that we can. The students of Marjory Stoneman Douglas High have rebounded from unthinkable tragedy in the most unexpected way possible. They've seized upon the unfortunate and tragic situation they face through absolutely no fault of their own to grab control of the gun control debate. They've rejected the lip service that lawmakers have offered in hopes that their attention would be moved elsewhere. As Marco Rubio is being buried alive on the CNN town hall. And rightfully so, for the disrespectful lip service that him and other Republican leaders, really just all Republicans, have paid to the victims. Instead, these unfortunate, tragic situations always yield victims. But these victims have been somewhat different. They've called out those lawmakers, those media figures, and those peddling these cheap, disgusting conspiracy theories on their BS, and let them know that their voices are here to stay. Thus, the CNN town hall. The students, teachers, and everyone affected by the shooting have been adamant that something has to change. For example, in the past week, anything and everything from universal background checks to an assault rifle ban to lifting the ban the CDC currently finds itself under, allowing them to conduct research into gun control, has been brought up and discussed. But now it's time for lawmakers to take action, something that, up to this point, they've been unable, mostly unwilling to do. And that's cost this country hundreds of innocent lives. In some cases, the lives of children as young as 3, 4, 5. Teenagers, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, just this past week. They had their innocence stolen from them. They had any sense of normalcy. The survivors had any sense of normalcy that they could have hoped for stolen from them. Simply because lawmakers don't have the guts to step up and do what's needed to be done. The executive and legislative branches of our federal government are held with complete control right now by Republicans. The executive and legislative branches of our state government here in Florida are held with complete control by Republicans. We can't simply wait around for them to do something because they've shown time and time again that they won't. This is the second mass shooting in 4 months, and up to this point, nothing has happened. As long as Fox News and the NRA are in business, most Republicans will do anything and everything they possibly can to please them, knowing that that's how they reach their base. That's how they stay in office. The only thing we can do is continue and pick up the fight with these students, alongside these students, these teachers, these parents that have had any sense of normalcy stolen from them. I keep repeating that phrase, but I can't emphasize it enough. These teachers, these students, the siblings of victims, students who were on campus at the time, the parents, the grandparents, anybody involved in these kids' lives, normalcy is gone. Stolen from them in one 1-hour period due to a deranged 19-year-old gunman who, for some godforsaken reason, was able to get his hands on a war machine. The NRA maintains their despicable grip and influence on the Republican Party because they've been able to successfully convince enough people that gun control is just big government coming to take over their lives one small step at a time. To combat this, each and every one of us have to get involved in some way. If you can donate, donate. If you can volunteer, volunteer. If you can vote, vote. The most powerful weapon a citizen has in a democracy is their ability to vote. If we want real change on gun control, then these Republicans that are tying things up in various levels of government need to be voted out. There's no more sitting on the sidelines. Oh, you didn't like either of the candidates. You didn't like Trump. You didn't like Hillary. I decided to sit out the year. Things happen at the local government, at the state government level. Things like this. Just because the federal government isn't willing or is unable to act on horrible tragedies like this doesn't mean state governments can't. It's important who's representing you at the state level, at the city level. No matter where you live, it's important. Just today, students from all across the country walked out in solidarity with the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High kids. Even from my hometown of Naples, Florida, a couple different schools had students walk out. And Naples, Florida is one of the most conservative places probably on the planet. You don't find very many liberals down there. You barely find any centrist Democrats. You barely find Democrats. It's one of the most conservative places on earth. And students are walking out in solidarity with the victims. This simply just isn't a partisan issue. These deranged gunmen don't care about political party affiliation. 25 times in the last 19 years since that shooting at Columbine, parents, teachers, students, and kids from all over the political spectrum have been needlessly affected by tragedy. We owe it to these victims from all of these mass shootings to take up the fight and push for change that prevents this type of tragedy from ever happening again. Really and truly, your political affiliation in this case could not matter less. The argument for gun control is really simple. You're either for weapons of war being available to the mass public, or you're for preventing needless tragedy. That's it. Absolutely nobody needs an assault rifle. There are no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Absolutely nobody needs an assault rifle. Moving the age limit of purchasing an assault rifle from 18 to 21, as proposed by Republicans like Rubio, is a BS solution. It's not a solution. The issue is the gun, not the age of the gunman. Raising the age required to buy an assault rifle from 18 to 21 is simply a way of buying more time with the NRA. It's Republicans saying, please don't leave us NRA money. Please keep contributing to our campaigns. Please use your influence to get us reelected. That's what it's come down to. For better or for worse, the Second Amendment is here to stay. But it doesn't have to lead to the death of children. Criminal background checks, assault rifle bans, and research on gun control are just the basic things that need to happen right away. There's no beating around the bush anymore. Those are the simplest things we can do right now, that lawmakers can do right now. Lift the ban on research. Ban assault rifles again. Institute universal background checks. They could do that as soon as Washington opens for business next week. But, as history has shown, nothing will happen if we don't make our voices heard. Lawmakers have inexplicably vacated responsibility up to this point and show absolutely no signs of letting up. 17 kids died a week ago today, for no other reason than their lawmakers failed them. The argument that gun control wouldn't protect shooting victims is besides the point. If lawmakers are unable to do anything about gun control, they don't deserve to be in office. Would gun control laws that have been proposed after mass shootings, would they have saved everybody? Who knows? But doing nothing is criminally negligent. That's just putting your hands up and doing nothing about an important issue. That's leaving people out to dry. These kids, in 1999, the Columbine shooting happened. That was 19 years ago. And it's still happening. Now with weapons of war. Really, what this all comes down to is that now this moment, this horrific moment in our nation's history, is the time for action. Whatever you can give, give. There's no telling how much good your donation can do, whether that's in the form of money, of your time, anything else. It doesn't matter. Just get involved in some way. That's the only way this stuff stops happening. These tragedies stop happening. From 2007 to 2017, half of the United States' deadliest mass shootings occurred. This status quo is simply unacceptable. In the most developed nation on earth, in arguably the most powerful nation on earth, why is this so prevalent? Why have lawmakers failed us to this degree? Why, in 4 months, almost 70 people were needlessly killed by weapons of war held by civilians? We owe it to these kids, to the survivors, to the victims, to the survivors and victims of all mass shootings in our nation's history, to stand with them. Right now, it's the Parkland kids who are in the spotlight, unfortunately. Tomorrow, who knows? It could just as easily be in any one of our hometowns. This issue isn't going away, in large part thanks to the incredible resiliency and really just incredible toughness that the survivors of last week's tragedy have shown. There's absolutely no reason this should be allowed to continue happening. Is it possible to completely rid our nation of mass shootings? In all likelihood, no. But you can lower the casualties by taking away these weapons of war. All it takes is everybody getting involved just a little bit. At very least, vote in the next election. The status quo simply is unacceptable. This can't be the new normal.